One snowy day long ago, a queen sat by her window sewing. While she stitched, her thoughts went to the baby she was going to have. The queen pricked her finger on her needle, and 3 drops of blood fell onto the snow. She looked at the redness of the blood, the whiteness of the snow, and the blackness of the ebony window frame, and said, "I wish my baby's skin to be as white as snow, her lips as red as blood, and her hair as black as ebony." Soon after this, the queen gave birth to a beautiful little girl whom she named Snow White. But happiness turned to sorrow, for the young queen died. The king was mad with grief. He could not bring himself even to look at his little daughter. Snow White was taken away to be brought up in another part of the great palace where her father could not see her. A year passed and the king married again. His new queen was very beautiful and very vain. Every day she would spend hours looking at herself in her magic mirror. Then she would ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" And the mirror would answer, "You, queen, are the fairest in the land." The queen could not bear to think that anyone was more beautiful than she was. What the mirror couldn't see was the queen's heart, which was ugly and cruel. Snow White grew up long forgotten by her father and hidden from her stepmother, the queen. Snow White was very beautiful. Her skin was as white as snow, her lips as red as blood, and her hair was as black as ebony. Then, one day, the queen asked the mirror her usual question. It answered, "You, queen, may lovely be, it's true, but Snow White is far more beautiful than you." When the queen heard this, she turned pale with rage and envy. She called for a huntsman. "Take Snow White away and kill her. Bring me her heart so that I know she is really dead." The huntsman took Snow White to the edge of the dark forest where bears lived and wolves howled at night. But he could not bring himself to harm this beautiful and gentle little girl. "Run away from here, Snow White," said the huntsman. "Your stepmother, the queen, wants you dead." Snow White was so frightened that she ran straight into the forest. The huntsman watched her go. Then he killed a young deer and placed its heart in a box to give to the queen. "I won't be lying when I say Snow White is dead," said the huntsman to himself, "for no one comes out of the dark forest alive." As Snow White went further into the forest, it grew darker and darker. The trees tangled together, and all around her she saw the glistening eyes of wild animals. Snow White was scared. She fell and burst into tears. But picking herself up, she found to her surprise that she was standing on a path which led to the door of a little cottage. "Maybe there's someone here who can help me," she thought, and she pushed open the door. The lights went on and the fire began to glow warmly. The strange thing was, there was no one at home. The cottage was neat and tidy. In the middle of the room stood a long table. On it were laid 7 little bowls and 7 little glasses. "Someone must live here," Snow White thought. As if by magic, all the bowls were filled and wine poured into all the glasses. Snow White was so hungry that she ate some food and drank some wine. Feeling very happy, she went upstairs. There she found even little beds neatly made. She hoped that no one would mind if she lay down on one of the beds and had a rest. she soon was fast asleep. This little cottage, hidden away in the heart of the forest, belonged to 7 dwarfs, who had lived there for as long as anyone could remember. During the day, they worked in their diamond mine, and at night, they returned into their cottage. Every night, when they came home, the lights would come on and the fire would start to burn. Their bowls will be filled with hot food and their glasses with wine. Tonight, when they saw the little cottage, they froze. The lights were already lit. "It's a burglar," said the first dwarf. "Don't be silly," said the second. They all went closer and pushed open the door. The food in the bowls were cold, and one bowl and one glass was empty. "It must have been someone," said the third dwarf. "Food doesn't get eaten by itself," said the fourth dwarf. "Maybe it was a bear," said the fifth dwarf. The sixth dwarf went upstairs and came rushing down again. "There's a girl asleep in my bed," he said. "We'd better go and have a look," said the seventh. In the morning, Snow White woke to find 7 faces looking at her. "Who are you?" they asked. Snow White told them about her wicked stepmother. The 7 dwarfs had heard of the cruel queen, and they were very worried. "The queen is sure to find out that Snow White is still alive and come searching for her," said one dwarf. "Yes," said another. "She is only little, like us, and we must look after her." All that day, the 7 dwarfs invented new things to keep Snow White safe. They fitted an alarm bell between the cottage and the mine so that Snow White could warn them if she was in danger. They built a pretend bear to growl if a stranger was about, and they made some traps in case the queen decided to come this way. The next day, the 7 dwarfs set off for the mine. "Be careful and don't let anyone into the cottage," they told Snow White. The queen believed Snow White was dead, so she was happy. Her magic mirror was silent. Then, one day she asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the loveliest of us all?" The mirror answered, "You, queen. May lovely be, it's true, but the 7 dwarfs hide one more beautiful than you." When the queen heard this, she was angry. She decided she must kill Snow White herself. She could trust in no one else to do it. She made 2 magic potions, one of them poisonous and the other for her disguise. She dipped a red apple in the poison. Then she boiled the other magic potion until only a teaspoon was left. Staring into her magic mirror, she drank. The queen began to shrivel and shrink, wrinkle and wither. Looking out at her from the mirror was the face of an ugly old woman. The mirror turned black and broke into 1,000 pieces. The queen put on a magic cloak that would make her as invisible as night. She put the poisoned apple in her basket and set off for the cottage where the 7 dwarfs lived. Today, Snow White was planning to make an apple pie. She was a very good cook and she loved to help the 7 dwarfs. It was growing cold and snow had started to fall when she heard the pretend bear growl a warning. Looking up, Snow White saw an ugly old hag standing in the doorway. "Hello, my dear," said the hag. "I have the reddest apples in my basket. Would you like one?" The old lady doesn't look anything like the queen, thought Snow White. So she let the woman in. I pass this way once a year, said the old hag, and I always leave some apples for the little men. That's very kind of you, said Snow White. The old hag took the red apple from her basket and held it out for Snow White. This one is just for you, she said. Oh, it's so red and shiny, said Snow White. Snow White took one bite and fell down dead. The alarm bell rang in the mine. At once the dwarfs rushed towards the cottage. The old hag fled into the forest, but her magic cloak got caught in one of the traps and she was forced to leave it behind. Now the queen was invisible no longer. The dwarfs chased after her as she climbed up the slippery mountainside. A wolf howled and the queen missed her footing. She fell and was smashed to smithereens in the rocks below. When the 7 dwarfs found Snow White, they were heartbroken. They made a glass coffin with the words, "Here lies Snow White, a king's daughter," written on it. Then they placed the glass coffin outside. 10 years passed, and strange as it may seem, Snow White kept growing and the tiny glass coffin grew with her. One day, a prince came riding by. He had dreamt that his heart belonged to a princess with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. The moment he saw Snow White, he knew he had found her. The dwarfs did not want to part with her, but they could see the prince truly loved Snow White. So they decided to give him her coffin. The moment the coffin was removed, the piece of apple which had been stuck in her throat fell from her lips, and Snow White woke up. "Where am I?" she asked. "You're safe with me," said the prince. "I love you with all my heart." He knelt on the ground and asked his beautiful princess to marry him. Snow White looked into the prince's eyes and knew she loved him. Snow White wanted the 7 dwarfs to be guests of honor at her wedding. Without them, she would never have lived to meet her prince. They all went back to the prince's palace together. The wedding was magnificent, and it is true to say that Snow White and her prince lived happily ever